What if I told you that the tallest building in Western Europe, a 95-story glass spire that dominates the London skyline like a giant shard of ice thrust into the sky, was conceived on the back of a napkin during a lunch meeting in a Berlin restaurant, and that its architect, the legendary Italian master Renzo Piano, designed it to appear as if it were dissolving into the air, with fragments of glass climbing toward the clouds in defiance of London's traditionally conservative approach to tall buildings? Welcome back to UrbArchitect, where today we're ascending into the story of the SHARD, officially known as the Shard of Glass or the SHARD London Bridge, a 310-meter-tall mixed-use tower that stands at 32 London Bridge Street in Southwark, just south of the River Thames, designed by Renzo Piano Building Workshop and completed in 2012 after years of controversy, planning battles, and ambitious engineering that pushed the boundaries of what skyscraper design could achieve in one of the world's most historically sensitive cities. This isn't just another tall building, folks. It's a radical reimagining of what a European tower could be. A building that challenged London's skyline conventions, sparked fierce debates about heritage and development, and ultimately became an iconic symbol of 21st-century London, proving that even cities steeped in history can embrace bold contemporary architecture when the design is thoughtful, elegant, and technically sophisticated. The SHARD rises from London Bridge Quarter, one of the city's most historically significant areas where the Thames has been crossed since Roman times, and its location directly above London Bridge Station, one of the UK's busiest railway terminals, makes it a true vertical city that connects seamlessly with the transportation infrastructure that has made this part of London a node of activity for 2 millennia. The building contains offices on floors 3 through 28, luxury residential apartments on floors 53 through 65, a 5-star Shangri-La hotel occupying floors 34 through 52, restaurants and viewing galleries on floors 68 through 72, and the stunning public viewing gallery called The View from the SHARD on floors 68, 69, and 72, making it one of the most functionally diverse super-tall buildings in the world and a genuine mixed-use vertical community, rather than just an office tower or residential building. Renzo Piano, who was already in his 70s when the SHARD was completed and had a portfolio that included the Pompidou Center in Paris, the Menil Collection in Houston, Kansai Airport in Osaka, and numerous other celebrated works, brought his characteristic attention to detail, his love of transparency and light, and his engineering-minded approach to creating a tower that would be both technically advanced and aesthetically refined, a building that would use its height not to dominate but to dissolve, not to impose but to almost disappear into the London sky. Let's set the context for how this extraordinary building came to exist, because the SHARD emerged from a very specific moment in London's architectural and urban development history. In the early 2000s, London was experiencing an economic boom, particularly in its financial services sector, and there was growing recognition that the city needed to accommodate this growth through new development, but London had historically been very resistant to tall buildings, with strict height restrictions protecting views of St. Paul's Cathedral and other heritage landmarks, and a general cultural preference for mid-rise development that maintained the city's traditional scale and character. The Canary Wharf development in the Docklands had introduced tall buildings to London starting in the 1980s, but these were concentrated in a former industrial area away from the historic centre, and the idea of building a super-tall tower in central London, particularly south of the river in an area that had traditionally been less prestigious than the City or West End, was controversial and unprecedented. The developer Irvine Seller had acquired the site, which was occupied by the 1970s Southwark Towers, an undistinguished office building that everyone agreed was ripe for redevelopment, and he approached Renzo Piano about designing something special for this prominent location. The story goes that Piano sketched his initial concept on a napkin during their first meeting in Berlin in 2000, drawing a pyramidal form that would taper as it rose, with the facades breaking up into shards or fragments at the top, creating a spire-like profile that would be distinctly different from the blunt-topped towers of Canary Wharf. Piano's concept was deeply informed by his understanding of London and his respect for its history and character. He studied church spires across London and Europe, recognizing that vertical elements punctuating the skyline had always been part of the European urban tradition, and he wanted the SHARD to function more like a spire than like a conventional skyscraper, drawing the eye upward and seeming to dematerialize as it rose rather than imposing a solid mass on the skyline. The cultural and political context was also important because this was post-9/11, a time when tall buildings were being reconsidered for security reasons, And it was also during Ken Livingstone's tenure as Mayor of London, when there was a push to create more dense, mixed-use development near public transportation nodes as part of a broader sustainable urbanism agenda. The planning approval process for the SHARD was contentious and lengthy, with heritage organizations like English Heritage initially opposing the project, arguing that it would harm views of the Tower of London and other protected landmarks, and with local community groups concerned about the impact on the historic Southwark neighborhood. Public hearings were held, alternative designs were considered, and ultimately in 2003, Deputy Prime Minister John Prescott approved the project, overruling the objections and recognizing that London needed to evolve and that this particular design, with its elegance and transparency, was appropriate for this prominent site. Construction didn't actually begin until 2009 due to financing challenges and the global financial crisis, but once it started, it proceeded relatively quickly, with the building reaching its full height in 2012. The same year London hosted the Olympic Games, giving the SHARD a prominent role in showcasing London's contemporary architectural ambitions to the world. Now let's dive into Piano's design concept and understand what makes the SHARD so distinctive architecturally. The fundamental idea is that of a pyramidal form, technically an irregular pyramid with 8 sloping glass facades that taper as they rise, creating a geometry that's both simple and sophisticated, both ancient in its pyramidal reference and contemporary in its execution. The building's footprint is roughly square, about 60 by 50 meters, and from this base, the 8 facades slope inward at different angles, creating a faceted, crystalline form that catches light differently throughout the day and creates complex shadow patterns on its own surfaces. The genius of the design is that the facades don't actually meet at the top. They stop at different heights between levels 72 and 87, creating the appearance that the building is fragmenting or shattering as it rises, with shards of glass continuing upward in an increasingly abstract and dematerialized way until they seem to dissolve into the sky. This effect is enhanced by the fact that the topmost sections don't have floor plates. They're just glass fins projecting upward, housing mechanical equipment and serving a purely aesthetic function of creating that spire-like termination that was so important to Piano's concept. The facade system is one of the most technically sophisticated aspects of the building. It consists of 11,000 glass panels, each one angled slightly outward from the facade plane to create a series of facets that reflect light in constantly changing ways, making the building shimmer and appear almost liquid or crystalline depending on the time of day, weather conditions, and viewing angle. Piano worked with facade consultants to develop a system where the glass panels would be highly transparent to maintain views out from inside the building, while also having excellent thermal performance to manage solar gain and heat loss, which is crucial for a glass building in a climate like London's. The glass is low iron for maximum transparency, and it has a special coating that reflects infrared radiation while allowing visible light to pass through, reducing cooling loads in summer while maintaining the building's transparency and lightness. The material palette is deliberately restrained, essentially just glass and steel with some limited use of concrete at the base and for the core, and this restraint allows the building's form and its relationship with light to be the primary aesthetic experience, rather than being distracted by multiple materials or colors. Inside, the building is organized around a central concrete core that contains elevators, stairs, and building services, and this core provides the structural stability while allowing the perimeter to be maximized for occupied space with views. The different programs are stacked vertically with the offices in the lower thirds, the hotel in the middle, and the residences in the upper levels, and this vertical mixing of uses was relatively unusual for London at the time, and created some interesting design challenges about how to provide separate entrances, lobbies, and circulation systems for each use while maintaining the building's efficiency. Piano designed specific sky lobbies and transfer floors where people would change elevators, and he created double-height spaces at intervals up the building that would break up the floor plate repetition and provide visual relief, though not all of these were implemented exactly as he envisioned due to commercial pressures to maximize rentable area. Let's get technical and talk about the structure and building systems, because the SHARD requires some genuinely innovative engineering to make Piano's architectural vision buildable and functional. The structural engineering was led by WSP, and they developed a system that combines a reinforced concrete core with steel perimeter columns and composite floor plates, creating a hybrid structure that's efficient for both lateral stability and gravity loads. The concrete core, which is about 16 meters by 14 meters, is the building's primary lateral load-resisting system, designed to handle wind forces which are substantial at this height, and the core was slip-formed continuously during construction, rising at about 3 meters per day until it reached its full height. The perimeter structure consists of steel columns at each corner of the building's footprint and at intermediate points along the facades, and these columns slope inward following the facade angles, which created interesting detailing challenges because you're essentially building a non-orthogonal structure where nothing is plumb or level in the traditional sense. The floor plates span from the core to these sloping perimeter columns using steel beams and composite concrete floor decks, and the spans are relatively modest, about 10 to 12 meters, which keeps the structure efficient. One of the most challenging aspects structurally was accommodating the different floor-to-floor heights required by the different programs, with offices needing one ceiling height, hotel rooms another, and luxury apartments yet another, all while maintaining structural efficiency and allowing the mechanical systems to work properly. The building's relationship with wind is crucial because at 310 meters, you're dealing with substantial wind loads and also with occupant comfort issues related to motion perception, so the building was extensively tested in wind tunnels to optimize its shape, understand the wind loads, and ensure that building sway would be within acceptable limits. The tapered, faceted form actually helps with wind performance because it reduces the building's cross-sectional area as you go up, where wind speeds are highest, and the faceted facades help break up wind vortices that can create uncomfortable motion in tall buildings. The building includes a tuned mast damper system near the top to further reduce motion during high wind events, though this wasn't sufficient to eliminate all motion, and some residents in the upper floors have reported feeling the building sway during severe storms, which is actually normal for super tall buildings, but can be unsettling if you're not used to it. The facade system I mentioned earlier is not just aesthetically important, but also crucial to the building's environmental performance. The double-glazed panels provide good thermal insulation, the coating on the glass rejects solar heat gain while maintaining transparency, and the angled panels create a subtle three-dimensional quality to the facade that enhances natural ventilation strategies in certain parts of the building. The offices use a combination of natural and mechanical ventilation, with operable windows in some areas, which is relatively unusual for a building of this scale, and the hotel and residential floors have sophisticated HVAC systems that provide individual zone control while maintaining overall building efficiency. Vertical transportation is another significant technical challenge in any super tall building, and the SHARD uses a sophisticated elevator system with multiple zones, including high-speed lifts that can travel at 6 meters per second to reach the upper floors quickly, and sky lobbies where passengers transfer between different elevator banks to maximize efficiency. The building has 44 elevators in total, including service elevators and dedicated lifts for the viewing gallery, and the elevator system was designed to minimize waiting times while also being energy efficient through regenerative drives that capture energy when elevators descend. Natural light was a priority for Piano, as it is in virtually all his buildings, and the SHARD's highly transparent facades flood the interiors with daylight, creating workspaces and living spaces where you're constantly aware of the city around you and the changing weather and light conditions. The viewing galleries at the top are particularly spectacular, with 360-degree views extending up to 40 miles on clear days, taking in all of London and the surrounding countryside, and these spaces use frameless glass to maximize transparency and create the sensation that you're floating above the city with nothing between you and the view. Piano also paid careful attention to the building's base and how it meets the ground and connects with the surrounding urban fabric, designing a new public plaza and improving pedestrian connections around London Bridge Station, recognizing that a building this large has significant urban responsibilities beyond just its own program. The reception and impact of the SHARD has been complex and has evolved over time. When it was first proposed, as I mentioned, there was significant opposition from heritage groups, some architectural critics, and portions of the public who felt it was too tall, too modern, or inappropriate for London. The SHARD was variously described in the press as everything from a work of genius to a monstrous intrusion, and the debate about it became a proxy for larger discussions about London's future, about whether the city should preserve its traditional scale and character or embrace density and contemporary architecture. As construction progressed and the building began to rise, public opinion started to shift, with more people recognizing the elegance of Piano's design and appreciating how different it looked from typical commercial towers. When the building topped out in 2012, right before the Olympics, it became a source of civic pride for many Londoners, and the laser light show that celebrated the topping out became an iconic moment, with beams of light shooting from the top of the building visible across the city. The SHARD has won numerous awards, including the Emporia Skyscraper Award in 2013, various RIBA awards, and recognition from international architecture organizations, though it has also been criticized on various grounds, including questions about whether its height was necessary, concerns about the dominance of luxury uses rather than more affordable housing or public programs, and debates about whether its economic model of luxury apartments and offices represents the kind of urbanism London actually needs. From an architectural influence perspective, the SHARD has been significant in several ways. It demonstrated that European cities could accommodate super tall buildings if they were designed with sufficient sensitivity and sophistication. It showed that glass curtain walls could be detailed and modulated to create buildings that are more than just transparent boxes, and it established a model for mixed-use vertical communities that integrate transportation, work, living, and leisure in a single structure. You can see its influence in subsequent tall building projects in London, including 22 Bishopsgate, the Scalpel, and various proposed towers that reference the SHARD's tapered profile and faceted facades. The building has also become one of London's most recognizable landmarks, appearing in countless photos, films, and media representations of the city, and functioning as a kind of vertical exclamation point that marks London's presence from great distances. The viewing gallery has become a major tourist attraction, with over 1 million visitors per year paying to ascend to the top and experience those spectacular views, generating significant revenue and demonstrating that observation decks can be economically viable, even in cities that already have many tall buildings and viewpoints. The SHARD has also sparked ongoing debates about tall buildings in London, with some seeing it as having opened the floodgates to a wave of new tower proposals, while others argue that its quality and sophistication actually set a standard that subsequent projects should meet but often don't. Looking at the SHARD today, more than a decade after its completion, it's interesting to consider what Piano achieved and what questions or issues remain. On one hand, this is clearly a building of exceptional quality, with sophisticated detailing, innovative engineering, and an aesthetic refinement that distinguishes it from cruder commercial towers. Piano's vision of a spire that dissolves into the sky has been realized, and the building does have that quality of dematerialization that he sought, particularly when viewed from certain angles and in certain light conditions where it seems almost ghostly or ethereal despite its enormous mass. The mixed-use program has proven successful, with the hotel operating at high occupancy, the offices attracting quality tenants, and the residential units, though extremely expensive, finding buyers who value the combination of views, amenities, and the prestige of living in London's tallest building. On the other hand, some critics argue that the SHARD represents a kind of luxury urbanism that's divorced from the needs of most Londoners, that its economic model depends on global capital and ultra-wealthy buyers rather than serving local communities, and that however beautiful it may be, it's part of a broader pattern of development that's making London increasingly unaffordable and exclusive. These are valid concerns that go beyond architecture into questions of urban policy, economics, and social equity, and they remind us that buildings, especially large prominent buildings in major cities, are never just aesthetic objects but are always implicated in larger systems and debates about how cities should develop and whom they should serve. As architects and students of architecture, we can learn enormous amounts from the SHARD about how to design tall buildings with sophistication and restraint, about how geometry and facade design can create buildings that respond to light and context, about how mixed-use programs can create vibrant vertical communities, and about the importance of engaging with the base of tall buildings and their relationship to the street and the surrounding urban fabric. We can also learn about the political and social dimensions of architecture, about how buildings become sites of debate and contestation, and about the complex relationship between architectural quality and urban equity. The SHARD shows us that it's possible to design tall buildings that are genuinely beautiful and technically accomplished, but it also raises questions about whether beauty and technical accomplishment are sufficient, whether architecture has responsibilities beyond creating memorable forms and solving functional and technical problems. These aren't questions with easy answers, and different people will come to different conclusions, but engaging with them seriously is part of what it means to be a thoughtful architect rather than just a designer of impressive objects. Renzo Piano's achievement with the SHARD is undeniable. He created a building that's become iconic, that pushed the boundaries of what London's skyline could accommodate, and that demonstrates the continuing vitality of contemporary architecture to create structures that capture imagination and become woven into the identity of cities. Whether you love the SHARD or have reservations about it, whether you see it as a triumph of architectural vision or as a symbol of luxury urbanism's problems, there's no question that it's a significant building that will be studied, photographed, and debated for decades to come. If you found this exploration of the SHARD and its complex story valuable, and you want to continue diving deep into iconic contemporary buildings with us here at UrbArchitect, make sure you're subscribed to the channel and hit that notification bell so you catch our next architectural journey. Drop a comment below and tell us what you think. Is the SHARD a masterpiece of contemporary architecture? Or does its luxury program and symbolic power raise questions that should make us think critically about what we're building and for whom? We love hearing diverse perspectives, and your engagement helps us create better, more thoughtful content. Until next time, keep looking up, keep questioning, and keep thinking critically about the buildings that shape our cities and our lives, because architecture matters not just as form and technique, but as a reflection of our values and our aspirations for how we want to live together in increasingly dense urban environments.